This is the slide of submandibular salivary gland, also called as mixed salivary gland. Why do we call it as mixed salivary gland? Because it contains both serous acini as well as mucous acini. The first question again, how do we say that this is the slide of the mixed salivary gland? Your answer should be, even here we can identify a thin connective tissue capsule, and then the connective tissue again divides the gland into number of smaller units called as lobules. Each lobule contains secretory component, which here is made up of both serous acini as well as mucous acini. Compared to serous salivary gland, you can see lot of light staining areas which represent mucous acini. Apart from this, the parenchyma is also made up of the excretory component, which is the duct, which includes the intercalated, striated and excretory duct system. This is how I say that possibly this is the slide of submandibular salivary gland. Remember, if you take a look at the connective tissue component of mixed salivary gland, it is comparatively less than the connective tissue component which is present in serous salivary gland. Right? So these are some minute features you must remember to differentiate between the slide of a purely or predominantly serous salivary gland and a mixed salivary gland. How do we go on describing the structure of a mixed salivary gland? Again, the connective tissue component is made up of the capsule which covers the gland, and then we have the connective tissue septa which divides the gland into number of smaller units called as lobules. So when we talk about the glandular component or the parenchyma is basically made up of the secretory unit which includes both serous acini as well as mucous acini. Right? One of the characteristic feature of mixed salivary gland is a structure called as serous demilunes. Let's shift it to high power in order to identify all these features. So once we shift it to 40x magnification, now in this one field, let's see if we can identify all the features of the mixed salivary gland. We can identify serous acini by their typical small lumen and serous cells which show bipolar staining. Then mucous acini at about like 6 o'clock position we can make out these are having a washed out appearance because these are mucous acini filled with lipid droplets which get washed off during HND staining. And the nucleus is typically pushed towards the base. So all these are features of a typical mucous acini. Then, as I said, one of the most characteristic feature of the mixed salivary gland is a structure called as serous demilune. What exactly is this? Serous demilune refers to a cap of serous cells which overlie the mucous acini as we can see in this field. So why this serous demilunes are formed? Remember, this is a histological artifact. When we talk about acini, serous cells and mucous cells of these serous demilunes lie together, but when staining is done, these serous cells are pushed to the periphery and form a bulge and cover over the mucous acini. So serous demilune is a histological artifact and we can see it here. The only structure which we can clearly see in case of duct system here is the striated duct, right? So striated duct, remember, is intralobular. It lies within the lobule. So this is a striated duct. Now fortunately here we can see a small intercalated duct which marks the beginning of the duct system of the submandibular salivary gland. In addition to this, if we see the top of the view, we can identify a duct which is lined by a single layer of columnar epithelium. Remember, these ducts which are present within the connective tissue are the example for excretory ducts, which are larger ducts. Remember, if a duct shows striations and is present within the lobule, it is intralobular and striated duct. If it is present within the connective tissue in between the lobules, it is an interlobular excretory duct. So this is the typical feature of a mixed salivary gland. So let's just explore the other areas to identify the presence of both serous acini as well as mucous acini, right? So if you just scroll through, here also we see a field where we have serous acini, mucous acini as well as typical serous demileunes, and we have a striated duct. This is how you should identify the slide of mixed salivary gland. And remember, how do you differentiate this from serous salivary gland? Serous salivary gland will contain only serous acini. There are no mucous acini. There are no serous demileunes. The connective tissue is plenty in case of serous salivary gland, and the duct system is very well developed in case of serous salivary gland. These are the features which will help you differentiate between serous salivary gland and mixed salivary gland.